can stop me. I'm all the way up. All the way up. I'm all the way up. I'm all the way up. Nothing can stop me. I'm all.
Alright, 515 Garage. Welcome to the first episode of building the Miata track cars. Today the video is going to be about changing a valve cover gasket. We're working on the 96 today. As you can see over here by the valve cover gasket, there's some oily smudges coming up from here. Typically a sign that you need to change that gasket out. It's a notorious problem on Miatas. So today we're going to switch that, show you how it's done. What do we need for this project?
10mm socket. We got our new gasket here from O'Reilly's.
That's what it looks like.
Just any old pliers to take off these breather hoses here. And a little bit of gasket sealer just to be sure on the edges here. Alright, first thing you're going to do to take off this valve cover, disconnect anything and everything connecting the valve cover to the rest of the engine bay. Got two hoses here, PCV valve. That should just pop off like that. Got a breather hose here running into the valve cover.
From the air intake here.
From this intake here. Take that off. Then we have the bolts holding the coil pack to the valve cover. They're already taken off here. There's one here and one here. And then take off all the bolts on the valve cover. It's all going to be 10 mil. Okay. The other thing we did is mark where the plug wires were in order. So when we put it all back together, we know exactly where the plugs go. So take off all the bolts, disconnect the hoses, take out the plug wires. It should lift right off.
And remember those bolts here? 10 millimeter. That saves you guys some times. 10 millimeter. Alright, so as we said, the first step is to disconnect the PVC valve.
PCV.
PCV, shut up. And the breather hose. Those are often just held on by hose clamps and relatively easy to take off. Alright, so that's the first step. Second step is to take your 10 millimeter socket and go around and loosen all of these bolts. There should be 4 on each side and then 3 in the center.
Yep. And you gotta be careful with these bolts because they're pretty brittle on a car this old. Or
Yep.
just snapped one before in our other Miata.
They're very easy to snap, and if you snap these, it's a pain in the ass to get them out. So be nice and gentle with these guys.
Really doesn't matter which order. You take them off them, putting it on, you should tighten them in a certain order. We'll get to that at the end.
The last bolt.
Okay.
Alright, the bolts are out.
Should just lift right off.
Everything's disconnected. Time to see if this thing comes off easy or not. Alright.
Yeah.
So that's what the underside of the valve cover looks like. You can see here the old gasket that we're going to replace. It fits into a groove along the edge of this. Kind of hard to pull out, but see, it fits. This little tooth fits into that groove right there, and that's where you put it when you're done. This is what the exposed engine looks like. And the spark plugs are right down in these holes here. You can kind of see them down there. All 4 of those.
Good time to check the condition of your engine too.
For sure. While this is off, be looking at all this. Look for any scrapes, any metal shavings.
You can
any
also
oil.
check the tension on this belt right here, the timing
Right.
chain.
Very important for proper engine function.
We're just gonna lightly cover this over so nothing falls in there by accident.
Yep, you want to minimize the amount of stuff that gets into your engine while this is off, because that could be catastrophic. Alright, now for the relatively simple part. Over here, we've got the new gasket and the old gasket. We're going to take the old gasket out. If you start it somewhere, it should just pull out, kind of. easily.
There it goes.
And some people recommend when you go to put the new one in, that you take some of this gasket sealer that you can buy at any auto parts store and put it along the corners, the obvious corners, like these guys up here. And of course back here in these corners, along here, anywhere that it might not seal up by itself as good. That's what this stuff is for.
What I'm doing here is just cleaning out these grooves here. Make sure we take off any old adhesive if there is any. It doesn't look like they used any sealer last time. I'm not going to use a whole heck of a lot. Most of these things don't even really need sealer at all. There's always a little bit of an assurance.
Got all the bolts here. Anytime you take a bunch of stuff out of your car, make sure you put it all in the same spot so you can find it. These bolts are incredibly important. You have to have them all in or your engine could potentially leak. Not good. Seal down onto the engine there. You don't need a whole lot, and some people say you don't even need any at all because of the kind of gasket that this is, the way that it goes into that groove. You may not even need it, but it also doesn't hurt. Like it's not going to do anything if you put some of this on there. All it is a safety precaution.
Also, we're not glomming it on there either. We're
No,
just
not
using
at all.
Kind of sparingly, right where the trouble areas would be. And I could tell there was a little bit on the corners before too, so.
So there's that. Alright, now the new gasket's going to go on. It's pretty straightforward. Just fit the parts into where they go on the outline here on the edge of the valve cover. Make sure that you get it all the way into the groove. Go all the way around and just tuck it in. Put a little bit of extra pressure on the parts where you put the sealant.
Just gonna double check everything.
And there you go. New gasket's in. Alright, so we're gonna start the process of putting it back on now. Take your cover off. Grab the valve cover.
Make sure everything's out of the way here.
Now,
Make sure
carefully
still seated in there.
place the valve cover back on in its proper position.
Just heard it go into place. I'm looking here on the edges to make sure the gasket's not twisted and that's sealed properly.
Spot to look at is right back here. This little area here, you can see my finger. You gotta make sure that's lined up. Good.
Right, looks like we're ready to put the bolts in and tighten it back down.
Yep, here we go. Now, there's a specific order that you're supposed to put the bolts back in. I'm going to show that to you now. Start in this corner. Actually, you don't start in that corner. You start in the center. This is number 1. 2, 3, 4, 5. Middle one is 6. Far one is 7. And then you go along the back towards the front for the last 4. And that's basically the order. You do that just like when you go to tighten, say, your lug nuts down here. You can't see the lug nuts, but the star pattern, you always go opposite so that it's tightened down equally in all areas. Same philosophy with the valve cover. Alright, we're going to get these tightened down now. the last bolt. Will it snap?
Stop.
Fuck!
Alright, they're all snug.
Alright, so we got all the bolts snug down. Next step is to reconnect the tubes and what have you.
Okay, that's pretty snug.
So the next step here is to reattach all the plug wires in the proper order. Three goes to number 3. And 2. So it might be a little bit different, but if you go from left to right, this one goes to the first one. Number 2 goes to the fourth one, the farthest from the coil pack. Then 3, and then the last one goes to 2. Don't quote me on that because it could be different for every car because these 2 modules might be different. But for this one, that's the order. Make sure that you get them in the right order. Now we're going to fire it up and see if we can see any leaks.
Not seeing any fresh leaks.
There does not appear to be any fresh leaks, which means that we attach this properly. All right, shut the engine off real quick. Let's go see if it works.